Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the LowCode Podcast. Today, we have with us Mark Peeler from Backendless. Backendless is a platform. It's obviously a backend platform. It's, I would say, a low-code platform. But we have Mark today with us, and he'll tell us more about Backendless, who uses it, and then his perception and his experience with the no-code, low-code space. So, Mark, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on your podcast.
So why don't we start about you telling us who is Backendless for and who is Backendless not for? Like who uses it and who, I don't even want to say who shouldn't look at it, but I would say it's a low-code platform rather than a no-code. So if you can help us like clarify who your client persona is.
Sure. Well, first I'd like to say that Backendless is a full application development platform, meaning that it provides an environment to build applications from start to end, both user interface and the backend. And then if you are into neither one of those and you just need to expose your core functionality as API services, we provide that functionality as well where you can build your APIs. So Backendless is really for anyone who has an idea and want to turn it into an application. You could be a citizen developer, meaning that someone who does not have a professional background in computer science or app development. Or you could be a seasoned developer that knows Java, Android, Kotlin, iOS, Flutter, .NET, you name it, and you want to build your application with code. And in this case, we can provide you the backend that you could use for your application. In fact, when we started, we were focusing just on the backend. And there is a story for that. I'll tell you if you'd like on why we were focusing on the backend first. And during that time when we were strictly a backend functionality, our users are the developers were people writing code, writing user interface applications with for either web or native mobile, and they were consuming Backendless strictly as the backend. Later on, we expanded the support for the functionalities that we provide, and we added the UI development capability, where you can now build UIs and integrate them with the backend that we provide pretty much out of the box.
Why did you decide to build this UI interface? Were users looking for a one-stop shop or...
Well, that is part of the reason. But more importantly is when we started, the vision was to provide an end-to-end application development system where you can build everything out of the box with one-stop shopping, where the speed of development is of the utmost importance, where you can do it fast.
Why did you start with the back end? Because in the no-code space, I see most of them start in the front end.
That you're absolutely right. Most of them start with the front end. Now, when we started the company, not only the vision was to provide an end-to-end application development capability, we wanted to provide scalability out of the box, meaning that if you have one user, you get response time, and when you have a million users, you should be getting exactly the same response time. Systems should not slow down as your user base grows or as your data set grows. Now, scalability is an interesting one because, first of all, it is a complex problem. Building a system that can handle the traffic of millions of users without any performance degradation, it is a hard problem to solve. So we wanted to solve the problem first before we could add UI or before we started spending time on UI. And because of that, if you were to take Backendless and many other no-code systems that exist today, Backendless is the one that will be able to turn your MVP into a full-blown product without any rewrites. Many other no-code solutions, you build it, you create that MVP, it starts taking off. More than likely, you will be doing a rewrite because the system that you went with, if it is not Backendless, more than likely will not be scaling that well under traffic, under load. So that is the reason why we started with the backend first. And it took us quite some time. We had quite a few installations, and at one point we basically saw that we can handle traffic infinitely. We have customers that are in the banking sector and logistics with last mile delivery, handling thousands, tens of thousands of requests per minute. Some high traffic games. Uh, we had customers that are coming from public and private universities where they put the entire business of university into the mobile apps, and they were using Backendless for their backend. And that really helped us to get to the point where we could say, yes, any kind of traffic you have, the technology can handle it. Of course, there is a correlation of how much processing power you put in there in terms of the machine, CPU, and memory. And a lot of companies solve the problem with just adding more hardware. Hardware is important, but it should not be the solution to getting the scalability solved. So once we got to that point where we could handle any traffic, then we expanded our team and started adding UIs. And some could say that, well, our UIs are lagging functionally, which is not true at this point. Where we are today, if you were to compare UI development capability of Backendless with many others, and those could include Bubble and Adalo and AppGyver and Wix and so on, you can accomplish everything in Backendless.
Okay.
So your question of who the target audience is, whether they are low coders, no coders, or coders, definitely coders. So if you're writing native code in Android and JavaScript and Flutter and .NET, we have SDKs, native SDKs that give you an ability to use our APIs. In terms of the UI, let's talk about logic. The way you build logic in Backendless, we provide a visual interface for that, which is called Blockly. It is open source and it is adopted by a variety of projects. For instance, Thunkable, a company that provides an app development capability, they also use Blockly. We do it a little bit differently, but the core of it is the same. And the idea is that for pretty much any element in your logic, whether it's a loop or assignment, or being able to invoke a routine or processing conditions, there are blocks and they look like jigsaw puzzles that you can snap together, and the system automatically writes code for you based on how you snap that logic. So it is a visual programming, right? There is no code you're faced with. You can add you can add JavaScript code right into that visual interface and work together. But if you are not good at coding, if you just don't know programming language, at the very minimum, you would need to learn our graphical interface for creating logic. Okay, so it is not coding, but it's a visual programming. Okay, because for someone to write that logic, you need to start thinking algorithmically, which I think is very important for anyone who builds applications. Because I run into a lot of people who claim that they are developers, but you start kind of digging deeper and saying, okay, well, how would you structure? What kind of data structures you would use? How would you organize your data? How would you approach processing your queues and tasks and so on? And then things just start falling apart because they have no idea what you're talking about. And I think that's a general problem with the no code, low code space, is because it attracts a lot of people, but some of them, and it's a good share, they don't have proper background or training or understanding of what it really takes to build an application.
Yeah. And I think that probably based on how you started, like building first the backend and then the front end, that's probably related to the types of projects and clients that you have. Because I was looking at your website and I see the logos that you have, like very large enterprises, banks, education companies. And probably because of that, you got more technical clients first than a typical no-code tool that they build a pretty front end, pretty basic back end, and then everybody comes in. It's like a honey and flies. Like everybody comes in, everybody can build an app, but then like either they don't scale, they are a little bit clunky, they just look good, but the backend is not robust. So you started the other way around. Did that change how you approach the market? Especially, I think in the no-code space, originally a lot of them were like, let's launch in a very cheap pricing structure in order to get a lot of mass volume. And then I see a lot of them moving into enterprise and raising the prices, changing the pricing structure. In your case, you started maybe the other way around. That's my perception. Has that changed how you approach the market and price?
Once we added the UI development capability and we demonstrated through a number of sample applications and some videos and some case studies that it's significantly simpler to build apps, where it does not require uh, people with background in software or systems architecture or seasoned developers to build apps. That expanded the type of audience that we can talk to. And as a result, we had to change how we talk to them. Okay.
Okay.
So it really broadened our horizon, where we can start attracting people who could not even approach us before because things were really, really complex. Well, and really complex mean that it would require writing code. In terms of pricing and in terms of the actual business model, there were no significant changes. We do have the product that we have is available as a shared hosting with our cloud that is available in Europe and North America. And it is a low price, high volume type of product where anybody can sign up and start working with Backendless. Credit card is not required. We do have an interesting way to onboard people. There is a system that we call Missions. And Missions is a gamified onboarding experience where we give you tasks, and the tasks could be as simple as uploading a file or creating a data table or inserting a record into a table. Once you make those tasks, once you accomplish the task, the system detects that you did it, and that you get a reward as a badge, and then there's some bonus points. And at one point, one of the milestones in that experience is we open up a free plan, because free plan, we do not give you free plan. You have to earn it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Nice. And you earn it by learning the system. And then once you learn a little bit, then you get that plan that doesn't cost anything. And it's perfect sandbox environment for development. It's very high limits. You can do anything you want, but it's not tuned to be used in production. If you are in a hurry and you don't want to go through our gamification, you can actually get
just pay, right?
a one-time fee of $50, and you get that free plan anyway. That doesn't cost anything.
Okay.
So that was an interesting thing that we did. That is very different. Nobody does it that way, and it worked out pretty well because we get people who stick with Backendless. They are the ones that either committed their time to go through onboarding, or they at least committed $50. Okay,
right,
and the stickiness factor is quite high. So people who stay with Backendless, they for the most part are going to be very excited about it. And if they're not, we basically hear and say, "Look, guys, this is what you need to do better here and there," and we typically update our roadmap. So, but as far as attracting enterprises versus developers, so the cloud option is used by a lot of different companies, solo developers, small teams, and large enterprises. But those that grow out of our cloud option, we do provide an enterprise option where Backendless can run on premises. The way we architected Backendless is we're not using any of the Amazon, Azure, or Google Cloud. There are no dependencies.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay. Backendless can run anywhere where Docker and Kubernetes can run. Anywhere.
Okay.
Like your own laptop, it's not going to be a problem. So people and customers that grow out of our cloud option and they want to move to their own private cloud or their own data center, it is not a problem. They can stage an installation and run Backendless on premises. And that opens up an opportunity for us to provide enterprise licensing and pricing and service enterprise customers much better. So with those two directions, where there is a dedicated hosting and there is a shared hosting, we can attract enterprise customers and then provide them with a product that matches their needs, as well as smaller organizations and solo developers with our cloud option.
The clients that you get, either enterprise or let's say SMBs or developers, what were they using before using Backendless? Is it usually a new project and they're like, Backendless makes more sense, it's easier to set up? Or is it like we're moving from whatever AWS, Azure, Google Cloud to Backendless?
It's a good mix of a lot of different things. Some customers, they they would have their own homegrown solution, and they just realized that they're spending a lot of money and time of managing their own infrastructure. Okay.
Okay.
And they just want someone else to do it. They basically want to focus on the
Yeah.
core differentiators, providing value to their customers, innovating within the app space, and then doing whatever they're doing. And they just want a scalable backend and a system that where they can develop quickly. And that's where we come in, because we do provide scalable backend. It could be either dedicated, because by the way, there is also an option where we create a dedicated cluster for a customer on our own infrastructure. So this way they get the SLA that they want, the 5.9 availability. There is a dedicated team that manages those clusters, and they just don't need to worry about the servers. And that is huge for a lot of customers. They just see tremendous value in terms of how much money they save by going with that option. So I forgot the question.
No, that's a good answer. And now I think I have a feeling that there was a recent move by the company into the no code. I don't want to say into the no code space, but let's say targeting the no code builders, the no code makers, or citizen developers, as you call them. Is that because you see volume in that space, or is it just to get on the trend of no code and maybe get the word of Backendless into more people?
I'd say that it is partially it is a trend because everybody's doing it. But
Right.
for me personally and for our team, we see that as a natural progression for how applications are built. Like quite often, whenever we are trying out a feature or we're testing things internally, we go with Codeless, which is our graphical graphical interface. We go with Codeless to create a little test or a more complex test to test out our own functionality rather than writing code, because it is faster and it is less error prone. The code that is generated by a machine is going to be of a higher quality code than one written by a developer. So the benefits of that approach are obvious. We use it ourselves. And if we use it ourselves and we see the benefit, it's obvious that other developers will see the same benefit of going with that approach.
Yeah. Okay. But at the same time, aren't you getting these very non-technical founders trying to build something they
Yes.
don't know architecture?
Yes.
How does that work?
Uh,
Do you teach them? Do you have I don't know, like a Backendless university where you tell them how to build a database or something?
we provide to give guidance and more of a vectors. Like, look, this is we understand where you want to go, and it's very clear that you're lacking some understanding of what it would take to accomplish it. So we try to provide pointers of the areas where the gaps are, of the kind of information that they would need to get in order to get to the point where they become more proficient. Some of those pointers we created ourselves, such as let's say playlists on YouTube and a couple of courses that we published on Udemy. And we're saying, look, if you are going to use Backendless, at the very minimum, you would need to become familiar with this. And here are the links. If we see that this is a person who is busy with their professional life and they're running an organization or their own business, and they just need to realize their idea, then we provide, we may suggest using professional services, because we do have a professional services arm that we can assist with application developer, or just recommend people in the community who build applications for customers. But it is definitely a facet of doing business in the low code space where you run into people who are not developers, not even by their the trade,
Not even logical.
right? Like they just people. Some people cannot think algorithmically. Some people cannot think in terms of how to structure data, or even procedurally, because they could describe a use case like, okay, when When someone submits a button, that order needs to go to someone who approves it on my side, and then we need to deliver a product. Yep, I'm just making things up. But so here, if you're a technical person, you can kind of start thinking, okay, well, there's going to be a database record, there's going to be a notification, and they open up the page and we render it. So you start thinking, but those folks who do not have that technical background, they cannot dissect that problem into individual steps where each step would need to be implemented one way or the other, with code or without code. And that is something that is hard to teach, because you either get it and you can break.
That's how we make a living, translating those needs into software. Otherwise we wouldn't be around.
We're breaking bigger problems into smaller problems and keep dissecting them until you cannot dissect anymore. In the essence, that's what engineering is about. And then for some people, it's just not their thing.
True. Yeah. Is that why Backendless is getting, let's say, connected to tools like Zapier and Webflow and Bubble? Like, do you think it provides a very scalable solution with a no-code and low-code interface? So like a very easy way of building apps, let's say, Bubble. I don't want to say very easy, but an easy way of building a front end with Bubble, and then using Backendless as the backend, or same with Webflow. Is that like a good trade-off? Like, use this as a interface. It's easy to understand. You can't screw it up, but then you have like a super scalable backend.
Well, introducing support for Zapier and Make Integromat was because those systems, they support several thousand different connectors. And we did not want to reinvent the wheel and start introducing individual connectors. And we see people run into scenarios where they need to connect Backendless with Salesforce or Monday or Google Spreadsheets or whatever. And it was just a low-hanging fruit to provide those integrations through Zapier rather than providing direct integrations. Now, it's interesting.
But at the same time, you have quite a few direct integrations, like Retool and DraftBait and Bubble.
Exactly. So just because Zapier could get expensive, and the same thing with Make, they could get expensive.
Right.
And what we see is that there is kind of not necessarily a wake-up moment, but a lot of people realize that building an MVP with Bubble can be quick, but it means that you would need to redo a lot of things if your application takes off. Just because the backend of Bubble is, let's face it, it's not as scalable. So, and people recognize that Backendless fills that gap and provides a scalable backend out of the box. So it becomes a natural choice where you just can integrate your Bubble front end with Backendless backend. And that's the reason why we published a lot of those integration guides for various no-code and low-code front-end tools for how to integrate with Backendless and bypassing Zapier or Make, which would be more expensive and going direct. See, our approach with just structuring an application is more compartmentalized, more disconnected than bubbles. Whenever you create a table in Backendless, or upload a file, or create a messaging channel, those individual assets, they instantly get their own API. So you, let's say, create a table called person, and you instantly get full CRUD for the table that you can invoke from REST or from any of our SDKs. If you create relations, you can start querying relations. And then whenever you build UI in Backendless, our UI consumes the backend through the same APIs that it exposes.
Yeah.
Okay. With Bubble, when you build the UI, it's sort of so hardwired with that backend where things are happening, you cannot really disconnect it. Okay. Which becomes a problem because it is so monolithic that it's hard to architect it in a way where it becomes, So, and by providing that API for the backend, Bubble developers can start just consuming data that comes from elsewhere, such as Backendless.
Right.
And that becomes just a better architected solution altogether, in my very humble opinion.
I agree with that. So if you've integrated quite a few no-code and low-code front ends like Bubble and Adelo, but at the same time you're building your own UI, your own front end. Why is that? Do you think that the bubbles out there are not enough or not good enough? Do you want to do something different? Are you
Yeah.
targeting a different persona than Bubble and Adelo?
But I think we can do it better for a number of reasons. For a number of reasons. One, let's just imagine that you're a Bubble developer and you're integrating with Backendless. It means that every time you need to fetch data or update something in the database or run a query, you're actually going to be doing that API configurator and then providing the endpoint API and then wiring things for arguments to be sent to the remote, to the backend, and then parsing the data in the backend. That's a lot of work. With our UI, whenever you want to query the database from your UI, you essentially use just one codeless block, that the jigsaw puzzle, that in there automatically includes all of the functionality to run a database query and providing the response. And then we modeled our UI on top of React, which means that all of the things that React is really good at, such as the responsive UI and then providing the data binding and separating the actual view from the controllers and the data models where they are, can point to each other through the reactive data binding. All those things are elevated into our UI builder. And then if you understand React, you'll be like feeling like fish in the water. If you don't, we still make it easy enough to kind of understand how to architect your UIs. So, and that I believe is just a better model. So that's one reason. Second of all, Backendless database is a real-time database, which means that if you have thousands of users who are looking at the same data set, if one user modifies it, and let's say public data set, let's say a sales organization, someone makes gets a deal. They save an order and then someone accepts the order. Support organization can instantly in their dashboard see that there is a new customer, and that is done through the real-time database where we broadcast changes to the data to all the clients that have the data object in their business. Okay. And that is without any polling. It is basically push through WebSockets. Okay. Right. If you are building with Backendless UI Builder, you get that reactive real-time capability out of the box. You don't need to do anything. If you're building with Bubble, you'll have to jump through some hoops by integrating our JavaScript SDK and establishing this connection and start building the listeners. That's more effort. Okay, so you basically get more out of the box by going with Backendless for both UI and the backend.
Yeah. Are you seeing Bubble freelancers and agencies moving from Bubble to Backendless for?
We see that. There is a trend. We definitely see that.
For what kind of apps?
For more of a business apps where the end users are actual business users.
What are these business users using today as a database?
A lot of them actually come from something as archaic as Microsoft Access. Or they store data.
So it's a full rebuild, right?
Or storing data in Excel. Or they would have their own, SQL server that sits on their network. And the good thing is that we provide an ability to import data into Backendless. Or if you run Backendless on premises, then we have connectors where we can connect to the locally running SQL server or MySQL or Postgres and expose the data through Backendless API, but still connecting to the database that already sits in there.
Are most of the apps and projects being built in Backendless, are they done by freelancers and like professionals, like agencies, or is it usually an internal IT department that stopped using whatever they had and now building your platform?
I'd say it's a 50-50 mix.
Okay.
Because the caliber of the customers that we get, they are organizations where they have their own IT departments. Okay. Mm-hmm. It really becomes a question of the time to market that they have, whether they need to deliver something fast, which means that they cannot allow for someone to sit and go through training. They need someone to start working right away. In this case, they outsource and bring a development organization. But if they have more of a strategic vision where they will be shifting to backendless centric development, where all future projects will be going through backendless, then they go through training. Sometimes they hire us to provide the training just to
Okay.
bootstrap their organization, and then they use their own internal resources.
Yeah. The agencies that are using Backendless, are they traditional dev agencies or are they no code and low code agencies getting into the low code to code space and learning traditional software development in order to use
What
your
we see
platform?
is that we see an interesting trend with traditional development agencies. They engage with us and they move forward with a no code approach. So they build applications
Yeah.
without writing code for the reason that they can do it faster.
Right.
They lose some of the billable hours, but they
Hmm.
win is because they can turn in more projects
Yeah.
in quicker period in faster time.
In your case, are you providing leads to your partners and agencies that work with you, or are they bringing in more leads
We
directly
do
to you?
certainly. We get a lot of inbound requests for application development, for custom application development. We do have our own team, which is more of a for strategic projects, the ones
Okay.
where we would know it would be a customer where we cannot mess up, or we cannot provide
Yeah.
or leave any opportunity that someone messes up. So we
Okay.
we plug in our own people. But for a lot of projects where we get inbound requests, we share the leads with the development community that we have in our
Is there a lot of demand for these kind of projects? Would it make sense for someone looking into the space to build a freelancing business or an agency building projects in Backendless?
there is a lot of demand, and it is global. It is global. So we see it equally distributed between North America and North and South America, uh, Europe, Asia, and even partially Africa.
Well, what are you focusing on right now? Is it mainly building the UI, or are there things on the backend that you still want to build? Especially, I talk with a lot of other founders, no code tool founders, that they're like, we started with this with a good interface, and there's so many features that we want or our clients want. In your case, I think that you started with a very robust backend solution. Now getting into the front end, like what are 2023 goals in terms of the product for Backendless?
So we made a significant investment into building out our marketplace. And our marketplace is basically a directory of all kinds of from small to very large type of components. The smallest component could be just a function, a codeless function that does something useful. You can put together a library of those functions or just one and publish it into the marketplace. And another thing could be, a page template that has some logic. And that could go, or it could be an API service that does something useful. Like, for instance, our own Stripe integration is a collection of API services that communicate with Stripe. Or it could be a complete application that we call Blueprint that you can publish, and then anyone can quickly create a new app from that blueprint. They basically get a
Yeah,
clone.
so it's like a template.
Exactly, exactly. So we made a
Okay.
significant investment to enable developers to publish those type of products into our marketplace for a fee. And that will be opening up very soon, where people can just start generating additional revenue by publishing their inventions, the things that they build into our market. So that's going to be one thing. And another thing that will be more, I'd say, in 2023 timeframe, is the support for business process automations, where you can automate workflows and in a 100% no code way, all graphical, where you can basically dictate kind of flow that the data needs to go through in an application. To give you an idea, if we take, for instance, let's say Uber, okay, everybody understands Uber's model, but Uber's model consists of a number of applications. There is a driver's app, there is a
Mhm.
passenger app. There is an app that customer support uses. I'm sure there are dashboards that are more exposed to executives, And all those apps are operating on the same data set, right? The driver app and the passenger app, they got to be communicating, not directly, indirectly. So it means that that's this additional system somewhere that coordinates that data flow, right? Someone had to build it. And it's probably more complex than each individual app
Right, because it connects to all of them. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and we see people building fairly complex applications in Backendless. In fact, suite of applications for a specific solution. So there is a clear need to have this kind of centralized coordinator with all the rules and then workflows and business policies and so on that need to be governed and executed by the system. So we are working on a system that provides that level of coordination where you can describe those rules and workflows and then build that main brain of Uber, but for your system in Backendless without any coding.
So that means that you're targeting, I would say, mid to large businesses mainly.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Is that like your own internal Zapier, or is it more than that?
It's more than that. It's more than that. Zapier is great as the connectivity where something happens somewhere, you execute a certain function here. Okay, which is only part of me. Basically, it's trigger action type of relationship. Okay? But on top of this, there are conditions and there are rules and policies. Like for instance, in an application, it could make significant difference of the actual role of the user. Because if it is a user who is a sales manager, then there will be certain rules that apply. But if it is just a salesperson, there will be other things that apply. And then, of course, you can tweak Zapier to do those things because they support conditions. You can inject your JavaScript code in there, but it gets to the point where you actually start doing coding within Zapier. And here we're talking about where everything is fully integrated, cohesive system where you can drive that kind of policy change or rule change or the actual workflows completely in a graphical fashion.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. One last question. How do you get clients? How do clients find Backendless? Is it referrals? Do you have like a marketing team that do content? How does client acquisition works today?
We do have a marketing team that prepares content, publishes out there. But a fair amount of leads or customers that we get are just by the word of mouth. They do their research. They find various articles that compare technologies. Okay. We are in a lot of directories that list no-code and low-code tools.
So that means that people finding Backendless are already aware of no-code and low-code as a term.
Yes. Right. That's right.
That's interesting. Because at the end, what we need to do is get the word of no-code and low-code out there so that more people find tools like yours or agencies like ours.
Right. And then in this case, it's the function of marketing. It's like this, this podcast. I'm sure, someone will be listening and will perhaps will be it will pique their interest on, what is this no-code thing? Or conferences or, videos or just really all the traditional mechanisms of getting the word out.
Yeah, cool. Mark, thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Great. Check out backendless.com to learn more about what Mark and his team are doing. And thanks for joining. See you the next one. Bye.